Monday, Smite fans, and welcome back to another fantastic day of the Smite Pro League, brought to you by our good friends over at Prime Gaming. Make sure you are getting the most out of your Prime membership by linking up your Twitch account into Prime Gaming. You get all kinds of free games, free content for games that you're already playing, as well as a free subscription to your favorite streamers out there that you can use every single month. The catalogs update, new stuff comes out for all of those games, and with your Prime membership in general, you get free shipping, music, movies, and more with that. So what are you waiting for? Get yourself a Prime membership and link yourself up to get some Prime Gaming rewards. Thank you so much, Prime, for being the sponsor of Season 9 of the SPL. I'm J-Mac. I got Goremizer with me. We got our triple header Sunday here in Week 2 of the second phase of the SPL. We're going to be starting off with a banger, Gore.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this. Well, Bolts Warriors again, especially. So going out of last week, probably not very excited about this one, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think the Warriors at the end of last week didn't look too terribly great. And so I was honestly expecting this week to maybe fall in a similar vein and maybe have it be a couple more weeks similar to Phase 1 before we started to see them pop off. And then they were absolutely nuts on Friday, and they beat the Titans 2-0 for the second time this year. That knocked me out of the park, man. I'm excited to see what this team has to offer. I know the Bolts have been looking really good as well, taking a win over the Dragons, which was surprising. So I think there's a lot about this set that has some fun weights behind it.
Yeah, we'll have the Bolts and the Warriors to start our day out, the Valkyries and the Titans for our second set, and then the Solar Scarabs and the Camelot Kings to close out our second week of the SPL. And we'll actually see the Kings for the first time this week, so we can actually give Captain Twig his most valuable primer crown that he's supposed to get, and we award him at the very beginning of the week. A look at the standings. It is the Kings at the very top with the Bolts right behind, 2 O's apiece. So a chance for maybe some spoilers out here for a couple of these teams. The Oni Warriors at 2-1, so still sitting at that third seed. And at the end of yesterday, we actually see with the loss to the Atlantis Leviathans, they are tied down at the bottom at the 6th seed with the Solar Scarabs. Maybe the most surprising thing so far, at least in Phase 2. But taking a look at this matchup that we're going to be having specifically, the Bolts and the Warriors. Again, coming out of last week, as you said, the Warriors, not the most impressive start to the season, but now with a 2-0 over the Titans, even with their close win up against the Scarabs last week, the Warriors should keep things interesting, and the Bolts able to find themselves a big win over the Dragons to start the week has got to be a good boon for them, Gore.
Yes, honestly, because that matchup, man, that matchup is like cursed for them. So being able to find any wins has been a huge deal, I think, for every single one of those matchups against the Dragons. And again, game-wise, it's a wide gap. Set-wise, it's a wide gap. The fact that they were able to tack another one onto their belt, I think showcases maybe their grasp of the meta being a little stronger right now. Jake, I think, was playing a lot better in this week, in this set, than what we got to see out of the Bolts during the end of Masters, of course, when the meta was really fresh and the changes were fresh, and even last week, I would say. So I'm really looking towards actually the duo lane for a lot of this one, specifically because I think Jake is not like the thing that makes or breaks this team, but I think you almost consistently get really good play from Lasber, you get really good play from Haddix. Vin sometimes is a KDA player, and sometimes is I'm going to jump in, it doesn't matter how deep, and things like that. Bear is going to be very solid, but I think that sometimes, and we see this sometimes in the Scarabs as well, where if your support maybe gets picked too early in a certain scenario, which has happened to both inbound, in the case of the Scarabs, but here to Jake, that has really changed things. So I think that this duo lane is a really crucial part for the Bolts' success.
And one of the things I've noticed about the Bolts as a team holistically is they're one of the few teams who aren't really doing a whole bunch of experimentation. You get teams like the Dragons and whatnot, they're doing double, triple Hunter, same with the Titans. Kings are doing all kinds of wacky stuff, so it's all over the place. And before we go a little bit further into that, we do have a tweet. This is from Destiny. He says, accidentally ordered espresso shots in Bear's coffee instead of mine. This man's about to be zooming this. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen super caffeinated Barracuda, so I'm very curious. And his response after is even better. Did they burn this coffee?
There's one of two things that happens here for Barra. One is he's too jittery. He misses every shot, and his gameplay is atrocious. The other is he is so hyper-focused from the extra caffeine that man becomes the best player of Smite for this set that anyone will ever see. And I don't think there's much of an in-between. Maybe he just feeds his brains out because his brain's moving faster than his fingers can keep up with. We'll see, I guess, whether or not it truly affects him.
And on the opposite side of the board to them, it's the Oni Warriors, a team who have been on the rise this year specifically. I mean, we came into the very beginning of this year. We came to the SPL qualifiers as the Warriors were, bottom 2 team at the very end of last year, had to qualify their way back in SPL, and they struggled a little bit at the start of the year. They were. It wasn't a clean sweep back into the SPL for this team, and so we were wondering, is this going to be a year of a struggle for the Oni Warriors? Are they finally going to have that breakout? Phase number 1, we saw that breakout. They made it to 3rd seed, made it all the way through into the Master Tournament. Didn't get as far as they had probably hoped. Had a little bit of a struggle then in the start of Phase 2, but have now been back on the rise. And I got to say, we talk about devastating combos and just player god individually, but there's one double combo in particular that's worked really well for the Warriors so far, and that's been the Dodgy and the Morrigan that's been played by Cuvo Dardes.
That's actually why I was really happy that the first thing we jumped into didn't have, the first highlight wasn't that composition, because that one, they had a Freya. I remember going into that set thinking that it wasn't even going to do too well, or if it was going to have to play a long con that the Titans were probably going to get a massive lead. But instead, Vote, absolutely popped off early on in that game, was able to I believe, find the first blood and then get a lot of gold, a lot of pressure that you don't normally get on a Freya pre-level 20 and pre-25 minutes. And so it was really impressive to see them, escalate things as quickly as they did. I think they ran a comp that was different but still very good in controlling for them. And then, like you said, they went into one that felt very good for the team, which has been this Morrigan, this Dodgy, to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if you have to start factoring that into your top bans. And that's where things get really, really weird, because when you look at bans versus anybody right now, most of the time it's going to be, okay, well, that's a meta pick, that's a meta pick, that's a meta pick. Top 5 overall for the Warriors. Ullr, Yamoja, Amuz, and Cobb, all 3 of those feel meta. Then you get to Artemis, which feels like a half and half Vote and meta, and then you see Chernobog. It's not, you're not really branching out there in bands that are up against this team, but I'm starting to think that, maybe you throw a Dodgy in there, and it might let something through, but you kind of have to deal with it. If the Dodgy disappears, that Morrigan, that combo maybe gets kind of taken away, so it does maybe make it a little easier to tackle the team.
It's going to be a very tricky situation when it comes to picks and bans, maybe against both these teams. But talking about these teams and maybe talking to these teams, we had Mifflin go for a pregame interview with some of the players, so we'll go ahead and throw that over to Miff.
Once more, hi-rez has decided to pay me just to annoy our players, and so I'm going to do that. That's what I do. It looks like we've got the Oni Warriors and the Olympus Bolts, and seeing as Jake is giving me a death stare right now, I'm going to go into the Oni Warriors room. What do we got going on in here? Vote. I see a big smile, man. Is that a vote of confidence? Oh, I like what I did there.
It's just seeing your face.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay. That's what I needed to start the day with. Dardes, look, last phase, Nico over there was carrying the torch of my fantasy team, and he's passed that ball on to you. Is that an added weight? Has that really reflected in your scrims? How is this affecting your personal relationships?
Nah, he has done nothing, honestly. I'm still the same guy. You probably didn't even know.
Did you know?
I knew. Okay, I knew.
All right, Dardes. How do you put your pants on? Is it one leg at a time? Do you backflip in there? Do you have an assistant? What's the deal?
Well, I jump and put the 2 legs at the same time, no?
I've seen it.
You've seen it.
It's crazy.
Would you be willing to recreate it for us?
I couldn't, even if I wanted to. You can't just expect that type of talent to come naturally to everybody.
Fair enough. Nika, when you found out you were no longer on my fantasy team, did you think that maybe I dropped you, or what was your thought process?
No, I knew someone would pick me earlier, obviously. Why would I get dropped?
I can't stand these guys. The egos on these players, except for Vote. That guy's super cool and handsome and down to earth. Chuckles walked in the room, but he's on the other side of the room. So that ends the interview. I walked the gambit.
Obviously, you guys couldn't hear us during that, but Gore immediately after Nika said somebody else will pick me up earlier, he wasn't wrong. Nika was he was like a first-round pick in a lot of the fantasy. A lot of these players out here, we've seen a change-up for the fantasy. I remember in Phase 1, it was pretty much exclusively Leviathan's players in that very first round. This time around, it was almost everything except for Leviathan's players in the first round. There was Solars, everything else like that picked up. A lot of fun to be had in the Warriors booth, and a lot of fun to be had in game number 1, picks and bans between the Bolts and the Warriors, with the Olympus Bolts in that first pick slot. We talked a little bit about some of the bans against the Oni Warriors specifically that could target out some of the, at least one of the big things that's been working so well for them was the Morgan and the Dodgy. And the Bolts are going to recognize, wow, that's a pretty good combo. You guys are really good with that. We're going to go ahead and take at least one of those pieces away. The Morgan, #1 ban out of the Bolts this time.
And the thing I'm interested to see is what the Warriors do specifically to target out Bolts. And that's already a huge one. Xing Chen was, I think, a huge deal for the Bolts in, what was it, games 1 and 3, the ones they won against the Dragons earlier, earlier this week. So that makes sense. You know, typically Nox is up there, Nemesis is up there. But again, the problem is when you get something that, like, okay, cool, the Xing Chen, in my mind, is really good pick right now because of how many auto attackers we're seeing in the meta. If you ban him, and you ban something else that is going to be team-specific, which I would argue this Osiris is a little bit of half and half. I think he's kind of on the rise and should probably be taking over some of those ban spots, at least a little more league-wide, but realistically it feels like it's a specific, okay, cool, we don't want Lasber to have this. Then you're going to be letting through some of the things that otherwise would be banned out. You know, like your Mercury right now is still available, your Nemesis, your Khepri, all of these things that have been very, very, very solid for teams and all of the top teams are still going to be open. And that, when your first pick, admittedly only means you get one, but you can choose something really strong.
Yamoja still up, who is the #2 most banned god across the SPL right now. We'll see if the Oni Warriors leave that one open. One shot at Jake with the Xing Chen, a shot into the jungle / solo with this Osiris ban by the Oni Warriors. And then on the other side, we already talked about the Morgan and now the Baron Samedi and Chernabog all banned away. So fairly meta picks aside from the Morgan and the Xing Chen. Those are much more targeted in that instance.
I almost think the Warriors, this one, if I'm looking for the ban, probably going to throw either a Nemesis out there or maybe like the Mercury, one of the two junglers. If you leave them both open, though, the Bolts then have several options. A lot of personal picks that they like. You know, like I know Jake's like Nox is insane and things like that. But if you leave these picks open, let's say they grab a Nemesis here, they grab a Mercury here, well, you get the other one, and you still get the Emoja. They grab the Emoja, cool. You get one of the top tier junglers, and you get another one of these top picks, like an AMC, an Uller, something like that. So I think this still gives a lot of flexibility to the Warriors just because of how many of those high prio picks are still out there.
Wow.
Well, hey, you know what? There's all the things I just said out the window.
Taking away not just the Morgan from the Oni Warriors via the way of a ban,
but
the Bolts now taking Dodgy away from Cuvo Fred by way of first pick. So, still a lot of options for the Warriors. You can still talk about the Nemesis, the Mercury. Those are all popular picks. Freya, I guess popular for Vote specifically, who found success on that pick earlier on. And Khepri seems to be at least the hover for the Warriors. So Yamoja maybe a little less prioritized by the Warriors compared to what we might think. That still gives a lot of options back over to Jake if he wants to go for the Emoji himself, wants to grab his signature Nox that's been working so well, plus plenty of other meta picks out there. I mean, if you can grab some of those top hunters, Jing Wei, while still kind of seems to be at the top of the priority list, I've been noticing she hasn't been having a whole lot of success so far this phase.
Yeah, and what's wild is, what was it? Her nerf was like just 10% physical scaling on the two. Like it wasn't a ton that was taken away from her. I think it's just the power of the others and the build itemization maybe favoring them slightly. I actually love what the both teams do here. I think that Dodgy is a good pick for Lasber. It's one that's been able to treat them well in the past. I wish I had my Season 8 sheet open in front of me so I could immediately pull it up. But being able to look at how that has picked or worked for them has been nice. But I think if you're locking in a Freya, and you're probably going to be locking in maybe like a physical hunter going towards Dardes, and so having a hunter somewhere else in the draft, you're going to have a lot of single target damage. Khepri deals with single target damage excellently. So grab someone who does a high dose of single target, and then grab the counter, grab the Khepri for yourselves. That now gives this Freya a couple of extra lives. You've got the Valkyrie's Discretion already, but then you've got your Banish, then you've got a Khepri ult. You've got a lot to try and help self-peel, and then a little bit of help from the support on top of that. I think that this is a duo lane is going to be able to have a lot of punch behind it as well, because while I don't think Freya is necessarily excelling in those first couple of levels, she's not bad. Her damage is still good. It's just that her attack speed's relatively low, and you are more or less relying on the cooldown of Pulse in the first couple. But with that small buff it got, what was it, like 15 power, I think, at every rank, a Khepri pull early on onto like a Jing Wei, if you just focus them down, or if you pop your Irradiate without using the Pulse and just go and wail on them the old-fashioned way, it is like smacking them in the knees with a baseball bat. You will take control of the lane, and you will be able to find a lot of power. And I think that's what they did last time, and I wouldn't be surprised if they can do it again.
So it seems the duo lane and the jungle are the lock-ins for both these teams in the top 3, as Nemesis is the final lock by the Oni Warriors. So a Freya Khepri, what we would assume. Sorry. Mostly because we've been seeing the Freya go into the duo lane. We've seen 1 or 2 mid games here and there to mixed success, and then mostly just coming out of the duo lane there. So the Jingwei Yamoja, Freya Khepri, Dodgy, and the Nemesis to round out those. So mid's still up, solo lane still up for these teams, which is weird because solo lane has been such a hot topic between the teams, but we have been noticing maybe a bit of a decline on the priority for the solo laners. So we see Osiris and Bellona both taken away earlier on, but King Arthur still notably available if they want to go to it. But this is a ban that we've been seeing a lot of, this Rise of the Yu Huang ever since he's been available for competitive.
That would be a good
teams
movie. Rise of the Yu Huang.
We need to write this down and save that for later, Gore.
Just someone tag at Lermy Wormy on Twitter and no context, just say Rise of the Yu Huang and see what she says.
We'll have to see. Along with Yu Huang will be an Ola-run ban by the Oni Warriors. So trying to take a couple of shots at Venenu, take away some of that safety in the mid lane, take away some of that team fight presence between the dueling dragons or even between the sanctified field that the Ola-run provides. And on the opposite side, Amusin made his way all the way through these picks and bans, as well as Artio, who, interestingly enough, Artio has not been very popular at all in Season 9. She's seen a very heavy decline from Season 8. But for some reason, this week, she has been seeing some popularity in the picks or the bans.
Yeah, you have to imagine some of it was, realistically, it was just Friday. Wow, day's hard. The Warriors, seemingly out of nowhere, just scoop her up. And you know what? She still does a lot of the things she did great last time around. Turns out, as a tank, she can still root you from far away, has good healing for the team, provides a lot of that team presence. I think the Warriors also just played it incredibly well. And while, like you said, hasn't necessarily been on the rise and hasn't been around as often, I think you have to be able to look back at that set on Friday and see what the Warriors did against the Titans and try to factor that in to your game plan here. You have to be able to say, cool, this is the style of game they played. This is where they're going to try to put pressure if they get these picks. This is what counters that, and this is how we deal with it. And you know what? Sometimes it's better if you want to deal with something like the Artio, just get rid of it.
Well, this is a comp that worked well against the Tartarus Titans last week for the Oni Warriors by grabbing the Freya and the Shiba Lanke. So now you have somebody who can utilize those kin sizes used up against the Cthulhu, at least, that the Titans had drafted last week. And now the Shiba Lanke one more time, particularly going to be most likely over towards Dardes in that mid lane. And then you have the Achilles and the Kukulkan as final picks by the Bolts. And the Kukulkan is something that Venenu has been playing a lot of as of recent. Before this, it was almost exclusively over to Big Man Tings, but just in the last couple of sets, or at least in the last set of play, Venenu is going towards this pick very often.
And honestly, I really like this pick just in general, right? I think that it stays safe enough because of the way it farms. I think that it's got a really good amount of damage because it wasn't just what we saw. You know, you go back, you watch Tings play that Kukulkan in week number 1, and you're getting a Book of Thoth into like a Warlock's staff into, the starter item and the Pendulum, and then continuing things like that. Vin went for, I'm blanking on it, Polynomicon. There it is. I almost forgot the name. That's the 3rd time this week that for some reason Poly has just escaped me. But he was going for the Poly. And again, a Zephyr into like a Polyproc auto with a Tornado or an ult afterward. Like, you will kill anybody that stands in your way. And so I think it's a really fun to watch how this build is evolving. And I think it gave Vin a lot of damage that otherwise wouldn't have been there. And that was like, just the passive, not even including the stats that you're getting off the item itself that are then enhancing things for you. So I really think that the Bolts, at least with this kind of draft, look really good and feel really good.
And one thing that I was noticing, at least in some of yesterday's sets, specifically the ones with the Jade Dragons and Leviathans, this Umoja, we've been seeing a lot of Umoja. I mean, she's been around and she's been meta pretty much ever since she was allowed in competitive play. But something I was noticing yesterday that we didn't see, I would say nearly as much of in the past, is using these River's Bukes on Phoenix defenses, using it to literally just dial in on the Phoenix itself and keep everybody else out of the range. That way that your damage dealers can actually attack the Phoenix. So we'll see if Jake maybe keeps that same level, at least up in this matchup against the Oni Warriors. For the Warriors, it really feels like they have a much more late-game slanted draft. Gore, if you are the Warriors going up against this Bolts draft, Where are you putting some of that early priority to get you towards that late game?
I think you want to shovel a little bit of pressure for the Xbalanque. I think that's going to transition a lot earlier than the Freya. Granted, last time I said that and I was like, oh, this Freya's not going to get anything done. She got first blood and ended up just absolutely being excellent. So Vote is maybe another huge factor for this one. I think the King Arthur can handle himself. You know, like you could probably throw some pressure over there Nika's way, but I don't think you need to. I think a lot of this could be given to like the mid lane if I'm Cuvo, and then over into the duo lane to try and get them ahead faster.
Well, the number 2 Olympus Bolts, the number 3 Oni Warriors. One of them's going to come out on top in game number 1. Who's it going to be? Let's jump in to game 1.
All right, Charlie, you ready? Let's do it. Yep, send it back, and we're going into game number. That was unplanned, and we kind of just did it right on the spot.
But we were practicing.
We were practicing it, but we didn't know we were going to do it just now. We did know, though, that we were going into game 1 of the Bolts versus the Oni Warriors. Now, this is a nightmare matchup for my fantasy team. I've got Nika, Neoma, Lasbra, and Venenu. So I've got 4 out of 5 players, 2 of them on each team. So unlucky for me, but lucky for the fans, Trelly, because I think Bolts versus Warriors could be one of our most electric matchups of the week.
Yeah, no doubt. And for your fantasy team, maybe just the opposition just farms, you know, like if the Olympus Bolts,
like Cuvo and Dardes get farmed.
Right.
And Haddix and Jake get farmed.
Exactly. They could just decide to focus out the tanks, you know, the ADCs get online, and you could still just have a dynamite set here. But either way, I love seeing just double warriors in the solo lane once again. I know there's been a lot of talk about the variety, and I still think those hunters are still viable for sure, but it just feels good to see people that aren't afraid to actually brawl out in this lane and not hide under tower, because that's more so what these hunters are doing right now.
Bro, you got to sit back, farm up, get to a point where you can fight in team fights later. I mean, that's what hunters want to do in the duo lane. You just got to do it over in the solo lane, I guess, nowadays. But doesn't mean we're not going to see hunters in mid still from time to time. And the Oni Warriors have liked this style of play, where you give Vote something like the Freya, and last time the Oni Warriors got this pick, looked pretty good for Vote. And then Xbalanque has been that like flex hunter pick recently, where if the top couple are banned out, feels like X-Ball has still remained near the forefront of that conversation, and Dardes loves playing this pick.
Yeah, no doubt. Looking at the builds though, usually the Atalanta start with the leather cowl. Right now, Dardes is going for that Death Toll, something that came into popularity once his first ability started, you know, changing a little bit, or the mana costs on the branching bolas. So now you get, every time you get auto attack, you get a little bit of that mana back, so you can reliably put some points into your one and actually get extra damage on the bolas. So Dardes is not going to be too worried about mana in this mid lane. And since he's up against a Cuckoo, you're probably not looking to fight too much either. I think Ven just clears the way with the NATO, backs off, and then rinse and repeat that until, I don't know, 3-4 items or so. And it looks like Gore touched on it a bit on the desk. Ven is starting with that tier 2 book. Could be the Book of Thoth, could be the Poly, Soul Reaver. There's so many different options right now that it used to be just if you see that item, it's going into Book of Thoth. That's just it. But right now, there's so many different options. I'd love to see where he goes.
I still think it would likely be Book of Thoth, but Ven has been a bit flexible with that build. Jake low. Could it be first blood over in the dual lane? One more auto for the Freya. It's a disaster start for the Bolts, but can be an opportunity to bounce back over on right. Nika just shy of grabbing the kill. Lasbra in, and Lasbra grabs one, so the Bolts are able to answer back and needed it right when the Oni Warriors get first blood. Fighting over on right results in a kill for the Bolts.
Yeah, and awesome Jake is going to fall down. I mean, with the Umoja start, I think not going to be the worst option, but your purple buff getting invaded, that's what's really going to hurt here, and it looks like Neil and Vote have plenty of damage for this, and Jake's on the red buff, so I think Vera's going to have to go without that buff for quite some time. Freya versus Jingwei, neither one that great in the early, but Jingwei from behind certainly isn't going to come online for quite some time now. I think Vera pretty fine with just sitting back and saying, you know what, no more stepping up for me. I'm not risking giving Freya another kill. Just a fast track to late game is exactly what the Oni Warriors want. That's exactly what Vote would love, so sitting back, probably the name of the game for Bera.
Looks like Bera is going to change things up from what we have seen. Feels like we've seen a lot of Ikavale starts. Something in the lifesteal tree. Devos. I guess some hunters will get Bloodforge if they've just got, that's what they've got money for. But Devourer's Gauntlet, the stacking up, could be nice for this Jingwei, but we'll keep our eyes on that. Awesome Jake has just hammered home this idea that Chronos Pendant first is what he wants on all of these Guardian, the magical Guardian picks that he's been playing. Are you a believer in the Chronos Pendant start for Awesome Jake?
I love Chronos Pendant on Guardians. I don't love it first. And, you know, just the glowing emerald from Neil and a shell that just makes you so much safer than a Yemoja with horrific emblem and Chronos Pendant start, obviously. So Jake fell for first blood, a little bit more of HP and survivability. He probably lives there. But he will be able to spam his abilities a lot. It's really just what you do with it. So if Jake's able to say, hey, I fell early, I'm still going to finish this Chronos Pendant and then force a bunch of Rivers Rebukes out late, I think he can get the value out of it. His team would probably appreciate him being a little bit more tanky. But the bullets have been looking so good this split. It's been working out. So if it's not broke, you don't have to fix it just yet.
Right. I wonder if that just, to your point, you just start throwing up the Rivers Rebuke to get active early in this game. See if you can get more kills rolling come rotation time out of lane. Does end up being Book of Thoth for Vens. We're going to be stacking up just a bit there in mid. Dardas hasn't gone back just yet, but Transcendence has been the popular mid lane start on a variety of hunters that we've seen there in that lane. Intrigued to see what Ven's going to be able to get done this game, especially as far as follow-up goes, because the powwow is going to be so important, Trelly, for setting up, of course, in a lot of these fights. Do you think the utility's there for the Spirit of the Nine Winds to maybe have an easier time hitting home?
This is definitely a harder game to be Cuckoo because there's no just easy cookie cutter engage where, okay, we're going to hit this stun and it's going to be set up flawlessly. The powwow, it's also hard to time the Spirit of the Nine Winds off powwow because Lasbra's going to go up and say, okay, I pulled this person, let's see if they beads. I can pull an insta-cancel, I can pull and stall out for a couple seconds. It's all going to be how good their comms are, and Lasbra's saying, pulling now, there's no beads, this is a guaranteed hit, or Ven's just going to have to let him fly. With enough CDR, you can do that, but I think they'll be just fine. Ven's been hitting these free ults as well. He's been playing this Cuckoo a fair bit and enjoying it. So I think he'll be able to say, hey, I can hit these ults off CC or just blind throw them over a wall. And as long as you're pretty sneaky about it, you can usually land some clutch ultimates in that regard as well. So not too much linear engage, but the bolts, they know how to set it up.
I wonder how wide Spirit of the Nine Winds is compared to Rivers Rebuke. Because if they're similar widths, I suppose Jake could just throw up the walls at anyone who's trapped in there. As long as Fen is on like a similar angle of the walls, could be an easy time to funnel some Oni Warriors into some big ultimates out of the mid lane. Oni Warriors have stabilized despite dropping, or despite grabbing first blood. Olympus Bolt's able to answer back pretty quickly, but both teams okay with the pace that things have been going. Cubo Fred, I was going to say 6 with the golden blade. Dardas gets out of the Spirit of the Nine Winds this time, but Lasbro remedies that into the mid lane. He goes now up to the powwow. Cubo Fred has beads, will use them. Neomod does not, so the Kepri gets pulled back. A Scarab's Blessing was there, may have just been out of range, and the Olympus Bolts dive into the mid lane and make the X-Ball pay.
Yeah, I think Neil just wasn't there in time or just didn't realize how much damage Lasbro was having in the backline. I didn't get quite a good look at it, but once we saw that ult come through, I think that confirmed for me. The Spirit of the Nine Winds is about 1 Kepri long, whereas the Rivers Rebuke seems about 2 Kepris long. Oh, Bear's taking so much.
Well, it's a 2v1 for Vote. One last bit of damage from the Valkyrie's discretion would have gotten it done, but an airstrike away from Barracuda secures the escape. Vote would have gotten both of those kills if there were no escape, no CC, no stun. And that is a ring in a tier 1 ring on Freya, and Vote is already swinging like that. Awesome Jake, a little squishy, I suppose, with the Chronos Pendant. It is Devourer's Gauntlet for Barracuda. I mean, if you're the Bolts, you're hoping that a 2v1 against a level 8 Freya is going to go well, and it does not.
Yeah, I think that Freya really struggles against these ability-based hunters. Lasbra's here, though, and Vote's going to have some trouble trying to get out. There's a Scarab's Blessing, and the chase is not going to ensue, so I think Vote will be just fine. But, Freya struggles into these ability-based hunters, like Ho Yi, for example. A good stun into ability-based damage is going to be fine. But if you're just trading auto attacks, Freya's going to win that because she's ahead right now. That Ring of Hecate is essentially a magical itch ball, but Haddix is in trouble.
Cubo Fred drops the ultimate, but so does Dardas, and so does Dardas. So, a couple ultimates expended, but Haddix, with that fatal strike, will be able to ult away, but that does open up Nika to farming up a bit more comfortably over in the solo lane. Starts it with the Sovereignty, makes some sense. Lasbro's been all over the map on this Daji, and Achilles plus Daji means a whole lot of physical pain early in the game for Nika. Be able to mitigate some of that. Rivers Rebuke goes up. Spirit of the Nine Winds flies through. There's your setup, and Neoma has to use the Scarab's Blessing And the abduct on the other end, but a good stun from Awesome Jake will seal the deal, and the Olympus Bolts just playing so effectively around Lasbra and Awesome Jake. And Venenu, of course, supplying some damage.
Yeah, that was just so much CC. The Kepri popping the shell, popping the ult. That's about everything you could do at that point before you just get locked down in place. You need the rest of your squad to come in and help you out. And with the rivers up, well, there's nothing Dardes can do but watch you fall at that point. So, unfortunate for Neil, and now Lasbra is 3-0 on this dodge. He has credit for all the kills on the side of the Olympus Bolts.
Yep.
Given the fact that there's so many beads for the opposition, the Oni Warriors have 3 beads and then the Scarab's Blessing, you'd think the Stagi wouldn't be able to find that much success, but it hasn't really been the powwow that like Lasbra didn't even ult there. That was just raw dodgy damage. That was Transcendent start, trying to get active as much as possible. Cubo obviously didn't have the ult because he just used it in right trying to kill Haddock, so the 3v3 in mid's always going to be a good place to look.
Agreed. Yeah, it hasn't been the ult from Lasbra. Cubo Fred just trying to keep pace here. Vote and Barracuda dueling out again. Vote handedly won a 2v1 a moment ago. And now it is Palau to start off. Dardes gets out of it, but double root in the middle. Then, no, is that the tornado damage that gets it done onto Neilma? Vote losing the trade against Barracuda. One thing that had been going well for the Oni Warriors, but look at this. Fen with the Spirit of the Nine Winds, catch Cubo Fred a bit out of sorts, and it happens again. The Olympus Bolts just one by one running down the Oni Warriors. At least Vote and Dardes are able to combine for some damage, but Lasbra goes back in. An important banish, but you can't banish the dot. Lasbra gets back on the board. He
can't dash in until his one's up. Lasbra's just waiting for some cooldowns. Jake's here to help and finally will go in. Can they trade the damage?
Yes, they can, and Lasbra will live.
That was less than 20.
Yeah, it was
How much
under
was
25 HP. It ticked up just as we went over to Lasbra. What a nutty game this is. Out of nowhere, we've just started scrapping everywhere. Lasbra survives. And really, that's how you can break it down, is how do the golden XP graphs change? It's all going in favor of the Olympus Bolts. The 1 kill traded back by the Oni Warriors. But the Bolts were just much more effective in that fight.
Yeah, it all started from the fact that they were able to pick Neil without using Palau, so then Lasbra comes back in, uses Palau this time, kills Neil once again, and then Vote rotates in, tries to get a trade, and man, Barra was hitting some great autos there as well. I think this Executioner is paying off for the squad because the physical damage dealers in Barra and Lasbra can really combine for some nice damage here as long as the protections are being shown. There's not too many at the moment for the side of the Oni Warriors, but you're just doing true damage at that point, so you want to be grouping up as much as possible. Vote did have a very good start to this lane, and arguably isn't doing bad. He's got that hasten ring now, is 2-1, but Barracuda's caught up in at least XP-wise.
And Barracuda's gone Divas into Xe for Dardes on the flip side, so a couple early Executioners here in this game. And you were right, Trelly, not only Book of Thoth, yes, that was an option, but also Poly for Ven. And so the Tornadoes were doing a good bit of damage there in that fight for Venenu. But the follow-up auto attacks should now, moving forward later on in this game, be a nice source of damage for Venenu, who I think up to this point has played the Kukulkan very nicely. Feels like the Spirit of the Nine Winds have hit as they've needed to, setup or not, and he's supplied some good damage. The Oni Warriors now down just a bit of gold. That's a caster's curse if I've ever heard one. That one splits the uprights. Down just a bit of gold though, but the Oni Warriors, I don't think, with the way the kills have been, should be sad with the way that the gold is. Ven might be sad though because Cubo Fred just walks behind him in mid, and that is simple for the Oni Warriors. Dardes got to disengage from this fight. Haddock will take the ultimate from Nika, and a simple pick over to the Oni Warriors right when they need it.
Yeah, Ven used the ult a little bit early there, and then it was just Cubo said, hey, there's no one that can peel him anymore. There's no big ultimate that knocks me up and it makes me so I can't DPS the Kukulkan anymore. That's going to be an easy regank because the beads were also down. And then the Olympus Bolts try to get a re-engage. Jake tries to force the ult on a Dardes, but just too much disengage. Once the lights go out, it's very hard to find an organized engage in the mid lane there. So great answer back by the Warriors. The gold lead still in favor of the Bolts, but it's not outrageous.
Nope. And it's what the Oni Warriors need to do is find openings to fight back. You can't just sit back and allow the Olympus Bolts to keep finding picks and keep running away with this game. Gold effectively equalized over the last couple of minutes, just a few hundred. As Dardes moves into what we assume will be a win, Demon, Cubo Fred's got one as well. Double sovereignty for Olympus Bolts. What I was looking for, though, is Spectral Armor, and I imagine with some more of that crit being built up, Trelly, Spectral Armor might need to be considered here for the Oni Warriors front line.
Yeah, Haddix is a little bit worried about the magical damage dealer because Vote was getting off to a decent start. So
Right.
a Bulwark or a Pestilence being built in that slot, or a Heartward, I suppose. Anything you really want could be upgraded from that Talisman. This is the issue about having different amounts of ADC damage, where if you're focusing all on the Wind Demons from Cuvo and Dardes, then Freya's just going to shred through you, and you can't get 325 protections of both. It's just not going to work out. You have to prioritize one. Right now,
Right.
it seems Haddix is going for that Sovereignty and the Glad Shield, while the Olympus Bolts are going for that Pyromancer uncontested.
Yeah, but no answer back by the Warriors on the Gold Fury. So that'll be a simple Pyro to the Olympus Bolts. And the Oni Warriors sort of hovering closer to the Gold Fury than the Bolts are, and actually some Bolts pings dropping down around those Oracles. Trebuchet is up on the left side of the map for the Oni Warriors. He can build some pressure over on Vote's side whenever you want to let that one go. And it looks like the Oni Warriors are going to double back for this Gold Fury. Going to be a collapse in by the Olympus Bolts, but it's Awesome Jake now caught out. A Banish connects onto the Emoja, and there was simply no chance, but it's a massive Spear to the 9 Winds from Ben from over the wall. And the Oni Warriors now feel like it's time to disengage. Scarab's Blessing already down from Neilma, saves the life of Vote. Rotation out from Haddix means Cuvo Fred also has to leave the mid lane fight. Big from Venenu to nearly set up a fight for his team, but it's ultimately the Oni Warriors with the pick.
Yeah, now the Gold Fairy probably not going to be looked at anymore. Just that pick on Jake could have opened up some doors, but again, credit to Ven, just a massive ult that forced out the Scarab's Blessing and also forced the Oni Warriors to retreat there. We saw both solo laners go over there, and it looks like Vera and Laspera trying to find some action on these Oracles. Just wanted some vision on that Fury in case it went down. But once both solo laners rotated over, that's when the threat of a Gold Fury pull became very real. Vote, though, they're going to step over a ward, could be in some trouble.
Yeah, Vote doesn't have ultimate. Barracuda hit a couple of these auto attacks. Banish, you assume, ready to go. And Vote will be able to walk on out just fine. Important that Vera and Lasbra leave because there's a slight rotation in from the Oni Warriors. Neilma hovering close by. Dardes was on a rotation path over from mid. Purple buff taken away by Neilma. Barracuda has to use his beads as well. And a small series of wins for the Oni Warriors could get better if you're able to take away the blue buff on the other side of the map as well, and they are. And you gotta love this if you're an Oni Warriors fan. I mean, you're held down early by individual picks and some good team fighting from the Bolts, but the Warriors not shying away from staying aggressive on the map.
Yeah, the aggression on the left side of the map started with Laspa trying to go on Vote, realized he was just too far away, has too much movement speed built, and calls that one off. Neil steals the purple, then you look on the right and they say, hey, Lasper's on the left. Why doesn't Cuvos come over here? We'll grab blue. Haddix loses that one as well. So now the gold actually relatively even. It was all Bolts for a little bit there as they found a lot of picks. Again, there's a 5-0 Daji on the map, but Lasper hasn't been able to find too many pulls in since these fights started getting a little bit more serious. 3 rings online for Vote. So this Freya, this is essentially is online. Of course, Barracuda matches that with the Wind Demon, so you will see a ton of damage coming from both of the ADCs. I expected to see more shells being bought. We only see 2 on the side of the Bolts, but I'm talking about the Warriors. Only 1 being built, and it's on Neilma, so you will need the Phantom Shell to get your squad out of the Rivers Rebuke, and there's only going to be one option for that.
I'm trying to get a good read. I mean, net worth-wise, 300 or so is what Vote is ahead of Barracuda, but then also Lasbra is 300 or 400 or so ahead of Cuvo Fred, and so those are really your leads on the map, and both of those equalize. Everyone else so close to being even with one another. And so when 300 or 400 gold are separating, junglers from one another and carries from one another, and everyone else so close as far as gold and itemization goes, you are effectively at an even point. The Gold Fury could make a big difference. A pick around the Gold Fury would absolutely open that up for the team that gets the pick. Oni Warriors, again, maybe considering it as what got a pick for the Warriors a second ago on Awesome Jake, but it looks like the Bolts a bit smarter with their positioning this time around, won't walk aimlessly, and naturally have ward coverage over on that side of the map. But is it going to be Jake getting picked again? A Riptide out says no. And a Rivers Rebuke just to be sure. I do wonder, if the Oni Warriors now feel like they can capitalize on that big team fighting ultimate being down, the Gold Fury gets pulled, and nobody from the Bolts is going to be in range. And when you're on razor-thin margins through 18 minutes, the Gold Fury can make a big difference. 1,000 gold in the lead now are the Oni Warriors.
Yeah, that was just a little bit of face being shown You know, Jake got scared and had to pop that ultimate. I saw that Nika had just backed, and I was wondering if the TP came in, but they didn't even need the solo lane rotation. They were just able to pull that one pretty freely. Even with Spear of the Nine Winds up, Ven couldn't get close enough.
Wow, a great series of moments for the Oni Warriors. Able to get the ultimate off of Jake, able to get the Gold Fury, knock down the Tier 1 tower as well, and end up looking for a retreat elsewhere on the map. So that is the first tower in the game to go down at 19 minutes. The Oni Warriors are able to regroup, push down the Tier 1 tower in mid, and grab a 1,500 gold lead for themselves. Olympus Bolts won't be worried about it. They had a similar gold lead earlier on in this game. As Vote is getting collapsed on by Haddix and Barracuda. It's going to take a big play from Vote to get out of this one alive. He is delaying his life, and a double banish shots it for a big play. And a Valkyrie's discretion cancels out the engage from Lasbra. This Freya just will not be jumped on. And the Oni Warriors ADC is able to get out alive.
That was sick, man. The Vote should die there 10 out of 10 times. Even with Neo rotating in, they have the Fatal Strike to just immune that. There's no res happening if you have an execute, but Vote stalls just long enough, holds his relics just long enough, and hits a double banish to make sure that he gets out there. And this is something that I wanted to touch on. The Oni Warriors drafted, for all intents and purposes, a very late game composition with Freya, Shibalanke. They've got a Nemesis, and they were getting a little bit, I'm not gonna say rolled. They were just getting a little bit over-aggressed upon in the early, but now they were pretty fine with just sitting back and saying, we'll get online. We don't have to force anything. Now that they're here, they are looking for action, and it looks like Vote is rotating over to this Fire Giant. At least the Pyromancer will be looked at. It could be a full 5v5.
Could be, and if you lose a full 5v5, you lose the Fire Giant, but the Oni Warriors won't take that chance. Olympus Bolts just had a bit better zone control on the Pyromancer. We'll head back to the Bolts. Doesn't it just feel like we're building up to just one big 5v5 team fight around a Fire Giant? We're nearly dead even. It's been back and forth. Each team has had their picks. Each team has had their moments where objective control has just felt better. And it just feels like we're moving into an area where the razor-thin margin is just going to be broken wide open. By the way, that one team fight, maybe one Spear of the Nine Winds hits, one big play from Vote happens. I think both teams will favor their own chances going into moments like that, and looking at Spear of the Nine Winds going to hit even more effectively. Not only Book of Thoth, yes, not only Polynomicon, yes, but your 3 for 3 Trilly completes all three and grabs the Soul Reaver as well, and then into the Tier 2 Ob Shard is Venenu. And so we already saw big damage from that Spear of the Nine Winds earlier in this game. I'm worried if that's starting to connect for the squishies on the Oni Warriors, because it'll shred.
Yeah, we've seen it being used pretty defensively as of recent, where Cuvo Fred is engaging and Ben's sort of using that to say, you know, back off, that sort of thing. So around a Fire Giant, you have to be saving that Spirit of the Nine Winds. If the Oni Warriors are just burning it down with their double ADCs, you can't be using that defensively. You have to say, you can't do Fire Giant because we simply have the best confirm on the map right now, and it is still available. If Ben does get CC'd, usually he can just send it out from quite a distance, so there will be a lot of onus on Cuvo, Fred, and Nika to try and just zone him and try and say, you cannot get close. You cannot walk up to this objective, because we don't want to deal with that. Right now, Oni Fury coming up pretty shortly. That's more so going to be the next point of contention. I don't think anyone's going for FG. Again, I always look at these ADCs and see where they are. There's a Jingwei and a Frey on the left side of the map. No one's doing that without them. Even with the amount of damage that Dardes has built, just a Wind Demon and an Executioner are not going to be enough to really warrant going for it, unless Vote's also going to be there. So I expect to see that a little bit later on the Fire Giant call.
Yeah, and of course team fighting, as we mentioned, the Spirit of the Nine Winds will be important, but can't forget objective secure as well, where if the Oni Warriors start up an objective, Ven's ultimate's up, that's something that the Warriors are going to have to consider. So you'd love to get a pick around this time. You can set up ward coverage, which actually the Warriors have a pretty stable grasp on over here on the left side of the map. Second tower of the game goes down, Tier 1 on left, and a slightly increased gold lead now for the Oni Warriors, 2,000 or so. A good opportunity to go back, spend up some of that gold. And I will go back. The Oni Warriors have pretty good ward coverage on this side of the jungle, but a couple jungle entrances important for the Olympus Bolts as well. Both of those will be covered. And I think Vote, Trelly, probably happy with the strength of this Freya build going into the next fight. You talk about gold leads, things like that. 4 rings online for Vote. The shred and the safety we already saw from like level 8. Now we're level 20, well underway in this build. Olympus Bolts need to keep their eyes on that Freya damage and the damage onto this Oni Fury. Awesome Jake is going to watch it get shredded down. Ultimate out from Dardes. All right, and that's what we've got. Oni Furies grab themselves, or the Oni Warriors grab themselves. The Oni Furies grab themselves an Oni Warrior. And the Warriors do get the Fury, and the Bolts just have to watch it go down.
Yeah, I think that was just better. I mean, you already touched on how much ward coverage the Warriors actually had there. There was just, you know, a lot of red dots on the left side of the map. And that just shows that they were ready for that. They knew when it was going to spawn in. The Bolts also knew, and they sort of looked. Jake was able to watch. Ven was not close enough to go for the steal. And even if that Spirit of the Nine Winds comes in, unless it's in a clouded team fight, a crowded team fight, I was trying to say, usually you can just reset it back off and say, okay, immune, now we're going to get it for free. So the Bolts not wanting to waste that one. They recognize it's late enough to where the gold does matter, but it's not as important as just staying alive for the Fire Giant and keeping your ultimates alive. Cubo Fred was going to wrap around here, but gets spotted out.
Got a couple individual 1v1s going on. Lasper engaging on a Cubo on left. Awesome Jake being abducted by Neilma in the middle of this fight. And Vote the Freya, that's your target. You got to keep her alive. And Lasbra says no way to that one. An opening pick for the Olympus Bolts as Lasbra goes up into the powwow. Neilma executed by Haddix. The Olympus Bolts simply team fighting better. And 2 now down for the Oni Warriors. Could be more as the surge forward through the Riptide begins, and Ven puts the hammer in the coffin, and the Bolts find 3.
That's exactly what you were talking about, Dave. Just one fight that would open up this game wide open, and now it's all up to Tardez and Cubo to try and stop this Fire Giant from going down, trying to stop it from being DPS'd. With that NATO, though, that's going to stall this out long enough. Barracuda stopped DPS, though. They're a little bit worried about the steal. This should be just a free objective, and finally they will recognize that. Even the carries are just zoning right now. They're not even helping. They're like, you guys can do the Fire Giant. We're just going to watch. Finally, it will go down, and you got to give credit to Lasber there. Neil was not even able to get the ultimate off, and it wasn't because of fear of an execute from Haddix. It was just a Hydra's auto attack cancel from Lasber that was way too much damage, bursted Vote down, and then Neil was just like, oh, where'd you go? I didn't even know the ult was coming. Vote had Aegis, by the way. He just didn't expect that much damage either.
Vote was he was far forward at the beginning of that fight, lost half of his health, and then to your point, Lasbra just evaporated the last half of that health bar all in one swoop. And so I think if you're the Oni Warriors, you say, how'd that fight go wrong? You're looking at an Aegis that's still up for Vote, and you're looking at a Scarab's Blessing that was not on top of Vote from Neilma. Those are 2 things that could have turned that fight around from the onset. But doesn't work that way. And the Olympus Bolts win the fight by a pretty wide margin, grab themselves the Fire Giant as well, and there are still 6 entire towers for the Olympus Bolts to knock down. Gold lead already back for the Bolts. Gonna get a whole lot worse here over the next couple of moments, but the important builds are where they are, and are where they need to be for the Oni Warriors. And I don't think this team will back down quietly from a defense.
Yeah, no, I think they'll be fine just defending under Phoenix. I think Freya gets a lot better under Phoenix. The jungle fights don't really favor her because, again, Vote had to get very close to even do damage to find a banish to try and just auto-attack, and not the best disengage, right? You can go up into the Valkyrie's discretion, but you can't cover that much ground. And without an immense amount of peel, Freya really can't successfully frontline, as we saw. So I think Vote a lot more happy to just sit back underneath a Phoenix and just let the enemies come to him, and he'll be able to auto-attack them like that. But the Bolts will have quite some time here as Haddix is wrapping around.
Haddix is spotted, but that space creation just means a simple tier 2 tower for the Olympus Bolts. I don't know if we'll see much in the next couple of minutes, though. I mean, when you got this many towers left on the map, seems pretty simple for the Olympus Bolts to knock down tier 1 and tier 2 in both of these lanes, send their pressure right down mid, and just force the Oni Warriors back to their Phoenix line. And then maybe if you have enough time, you consider a Phoenix Siege towards the end of this Fire Giant. You got a couple minutes left. Maybe a soft defense just to burn some extra time off, but if I'm the Oni Warriors, you got to realize if you lose a 5v5 here, and it's a hefty loss, the game's just over. So how much are you willing to risk to defend this tier 2? Not much is the answer. Neilma tossed around by the Riptide just a bit. And I think the Bolts have gotten what they came for here. So it's really about gold spooling, and I think probably being able to go back, spend up some of this nice new gold that the Bolts have gotten, and giving yourself a good chance at the next FG, the next Phoenix Sieges, things like that.
I had my eyes on Cuvo that whole time. He was just hiding in the back camps. I was like, surely they're going to go for a defense.
Wait, was he all the way over there?
No, he was in his own back camps, hiding, waiting to see if anyone would step up too far, maybe waiting for a cue from the team saying, we can go in now. And now Cuvo's going to have to back up. He was just looking for some farm at that point, and it looks like Ven with the polyprox and Jake going for the ult.
Man, this is a pump fake from the Olympus Bolts. They back up towards the Fury, drop the River's Rebuke, drop the Spirit of the Nine Winds, and it hits home yet again for Venenu. Palau up and down from Lasbra, takes beads off of Dardes, but that is it. I like that play from the Bolts that kind of ease off, make the Oni Warriors think that it's a full-on reset, and then run right back in with the River's Rebuke.
Yeah, and that was just all. They got what they came for, that left side Phoenix. And with an early Fire Giant like that, and it wasn't that early. I mean, it's almost EFG time, but still, with your first Fire Giant, usually you're cleaning up some towers, getting some extra gold, and then just setting up for the next one where you can actually siege Phoenix. But with a play like that, you got Bumba's Hammer on Lasbra, you got the Polynomicon on Ven, and you have an ADC that's just Jingwei's able to swing. So with just a little bit of time, you can burn through that Phoenix very, very quickly. We saw the beads go down from Dardes, and obviously Neil had to use that Scarab's Blessing to cleanse himself. And the reason I'm highlighting that Bumba's Hammer is because Lasbra's ult is almost up again. And there's an enhanced Fire Giant coming shortly. You don't want to step up to that without your beads for 2 minutes. So Dardes is going to have to be very far back or just have his finger ready on that Rising Jaguar, because it's very easy to pull someone out of that dash. There's only a small window where you're actually CC immune.
And a couple members of the Oni Warriors feel like they've been completely mitigated this game. Cuvo Fred hasn't seen much action on this Nemesis. I mean, at 1, 1, and 2. Yes, none of the Oni Warriors have it, 4 total kills, but pretty low on the damage charts. Junglers have had a big impact as far as engage and kind of deleting that last bit of health in Lasbra's case. And I'm actually surprised to see Nika as high up on the damage charts as he is. I mean, he is trying on this King Arthur, but has been the target for the Olympus Bolts the last couple of times. Buying space, yes. Buying kill impact, no, not just yet. And this is a tough call for the Oni Warriors, Trelly, where you're down so much gold. You actually have decent wave coverage on left. The fire minions pretty far back on that left side. You've got a little bit of time before those get into the Titan room. It looks like the Warriors considering stepping up here. It is enhanced and might be extra important to defend that.
Yeah, this is the scariest part about playing King Arthur with no beads. You have the upgraded teleport, you have Blink. The only conditional CC immunity you have is when you have full energy on that ultimate. If you have that, you're not worried about Lasbra. If you don't, you're afraid to step up. So Nika can get active, but he has to clear 3 waves of minions first and make sure that he's ready, because if that doesn't happen, you're essentially just giving yourself a free kill, or at least a free pull in, and you don't want to be wasting a Scarab's Blessing on a King Arthur. You'd rather have that on your carries more often than not. So as long as Nika holds that ultimate and says, hey, if that pull comes in, I'll be able to zoom on out of here, then he can be as explosive as he wants, dive the backline, be annoying.
Yep.
If those conditions are not met, then you're going to see a very passive King Arthur who's afraid to go in because he'll get pulled and just delete it.
I mean, this player god combo just carries so much weight. Nika's King Arthur has been talked about for years. This would be a big talking point in this game if Cuvo Fred ended up getting picked out. Dropped his ultimate. A pretty important ultimate at that. Shredding down some of these tanks from the Bolts hasn't been easy. Now going to be more difficult. Nika continuing to push down the left side fire minions. The rest of the Oni Warriors doing their best just to stay alive, and Nika is going to have to do more, or Nilma rather, is going to have to do more than that. Spirit of the Nine Winds finishes off the kill, as Nika has found the backline, but Venenu has already done the damage. Nika's teleported into the fight. Volt pulled back into the parallel, execute from Haddix, it hits home. Lasbra's unstoppable, and the dominoes are falling. The Oni Warriors step up, and it's the worst mistake they've made this game. Olympus Bolts knocked down 4. And it looks like soon they'll be knocking down the Titan.
Yeah, Ven has been hitting these clutch ults whenever he needs to. Neil, once again, is not able to get that ultimate off, and it's not fear of the fatal strike. Haddix was not there. Haddix was over on Vote, executing him. This Khepri just having a rough game trying to be the solo frontliner because Nika was clearing fire waves. Dardes is not going to be able to 1v5 here.
What a game 1 from the Olympus Bolts. They hit the gas pedal early, and they kept it down all game long. There was fight back. There was pushback in this game from the Oni Warriors, but that one Fire Giant fight ended up making all of the difference in game 1 to the Olympus Bolts. Lasbra goes undying, Venenu has a massive game, and so those two things, great for my fantasy team. Unfortunately for my fantasy team, Nika goes 0-3. Neoma is 0-4 with a few assists. Tough for the initiators, the frontliners, the Oni Warriors here in this game.
Yeah, you don't want to see Dachi get off to that much of an explosive start. Her late game is just so powerful anyway, so if she gets online early like Lasper did, it's very difficult to deal with. We saw, I mean, the most important part of that whole Fire Giant siege was Lasper just absolutely deleting Vote with Aegis up, with the Scarabs blessing up. There was a moment where they were like, I can live this, and then Lasper said, no you can't, I have a massive power spike.
Yeah, Lasper looked fantastic on this Daji. It was early drafted for the Olympus Bolts. You need to get some payoff when you're drafting something that early in the draft, and the Olympus Bolts sure did. But what are the Oni Warriors good at? They're good at coming back. Their mental is so strong. Don't count them out of this set just yet. Game number 2, right after this.
Cerberus needs a new toy. Yes. I'm on it. Note to self, bring home bones of enemies for Cerberus to chew upon.
A cat's life is hard. You should always pamper them.
No. Excellent. This will do. Thanks.
Be my heartbreak, be my one-on-one, be my only one, you're my only love. Be my heartbreak, be my one-on-one, be my only one, you're my only love. Message, hit me now, you get the message. Who are you texting? It's not me then, babe, who are you texting? Hit me back, I hope you get the message. Calm you down cause you been acting reckless. Flood the ring and I bust down the necklace. Doesn't mean a thing, just know I spend it. Doesn't change a thing, just know I spend it on you. Get you Louis if you want it, no, that's nothing, no. You could tell me that it's something, but it's nothing, no. You ignore me, but you're always on that phone. Acting funny, but you tell me that you love me, though. Yeah, you tell me that you love me, though. Wanna believe it, but I feel it, that it's something wrong. Babe, just tell me what's going on. Be my heartbreak, be my one-on-one, be my only one, you're my only love. Be my heartbreak, be my one-on-one, be my only one, you're my only love. Message, hit me now, you get the message. Who are you texting? It's not me then, babe, who are you texting? Hit me back, I hope you get the message. I was doing me, left you neglected. Now I feel the pain, I feel the tension. I know I did you wrong, it's unexpected. I know I did you wrong, but I still checking on you. Now you tell me that you're leaving, but you frontin' on. Getting done, I'm going out like who you stunting for. Girl, stop playing, all I'm saying is when you coming home. Say you hate me, but I really know you love me though. Yeah, I really know you love me though. Wanna believe it, but I feel it, that is something wrong. They just tell me what's going on. Be my heartbreak, be my one-on-one, be my only one, you're my only love. Be my heartbreak, be my one-on-one, be my only one, you're my only love. Message, hit me now, you get the message. Who are you texting? It's not me then, babe, who are you texting? Hit me back, I hope you get the message.
Hello and welcome back to the Smite Pro League. The Olympus Bolts find a win in game number 1, and just like at home and just like in the studios, our pros and our production, everybody else, are playing on the best PCs that we can offer to them, the Alienware Aurora Ryzen 10s. Thanks to our good sponsors and friends over at Alienware for powering our players and our production team to bring you guys and to bring our players the best experience possible. Make sure to go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code AWSmite09 to see what kind of cool offers that you have at home for yourself and get to see all the cool specs into what our players are playing on that gear. Make sure to follow Alienware at Alienware on both Twitter and Instagram to see what they've got going on, and go to AlienwareArena.com to see all the cool giveaways and everything else going through. The Olympus Bolts, though, in game number 1 do find a win. It started off strong for the Warriors. In fact, Vote was on a tear in the duo lane to start things out. But as highlighted, that one Fire Giant fight goes a bit south for the Warriors. From that point on, the Olympus Bolts take control of the game and then take game number 1.
And I think a lot of it, you know, like you said, kind of spread out throughout all of that. Of course, we have to talk about Lazara, I think, at a certain point, and it's very easy because he looked really good, goes undying, plays this dodgy. There's actually, and I'm blanking on the app, but someone on Twitter had asked about specifically like Lazara on this dodgy because it's one thing that, you know, taking it away from Cuvo, that feels really solid in this set. Lazara's also got a really good track record on Daji. He's got a 2.7 total KDA career-wide, which is nuts to be able to keep up. A 10.5 in this game. He's got a 74% win rate on this guy.
That's pretty good.
So, yeah, Lazara pops off when he picks up the Daji. And for the Bolts here, it really was able to showcase itself. And something, again, that works out really well as a counter pick, in the sense that it strips something strong away from Cuvo, while giving the Bolts something incredibly powerful to work with. And I think that they dialed in, right? Like you said, the first couple of minutes of this game did not go the way they wanted to. Vote has a really, really good early game, which, again, surprises me on a Freya, but it works out incredibly well for them. Until it doesn't, right? and then you know, it's been highlighted by the cast, but you get one really pivotal fight around a Fire Giant. Lazara gets to go big. Vin has massive damage by the end of this game, and you can really see it. Yeah, 23k up almost outside of Haddix, who, if you maybe take away some of the just solo lane matchup damage that's going to be, pretty much 10k up on everybody on his team. So I really do. I think just love the entire draft and then the play on field. It was a rough early game for him, but I think the bounce back for the Bolts was phenomenal.
And one thing that the Bolts have been working on a lot in this season specifically is trying to go away from having to only have a single person carry their team. You know, some teams in the past have gone, okay, well, if we can make sure that, you know, Jake doesn't have a couple of his select good picks, then they're not going to have anything. The Bolts are going to fall apart. If we can make sure that Lazara doesn't have a key pick in the jungle, then the Bolts are going to fall apart. But the Bolts have been able to build themselves, like many other teams, to be able to have power players in all of those roles, to have power picks in all of those roles to find success. Game picks and bans for game number 2 underway. The only Warriors now, the ones with first pick.
Isn't it crazy that all that caffeine that's coursing through Bera's body has him vibrating so fast he turned invisible in studio?
That's insane.
That's wild.
I want that kind of
power. Look at that. You can't even see him. He's going too fast.
It's almost like that one Futurama episode where Fry drinks, what was it, 100?
It
was 100
cups of coffee
at
for $300. Yeah. And then,
he
like, the last one,
stops.
all of a sudden, everything freezes. That's such a good episode, dude.
That was a really
good Futurama's a great show. If you're out there, look, because I know, like, we've got a wide range of ages that watch Smite Pro.
That's just a good one to watch.
Obviously not right now. Stay tuned for the rest of the broadcast. But then, like, if you're, like, watching, you know, you're sitting around at home later tonight, and you're just like, man, I don't have anything I want to watch. Watch Futurama.
Futurama's good.
It's a good show, man.
It's a good show. Some good bands rolling out right away, too. The Oni Warriors still targeting a little bit of Jake there with the Xing Qian and then Barracuda's Jing Wei, and now a Bellona ban. The Olympus Bolts will take away Daji, Morgan, and Churtobox. They're taking the full combo way in bans this time up against the Warriors, but that leaves this Osiris, which has been rising himself amongst the priority list for the picks and bans. You know, last week we saw hints, some lights, a couple of shots over towards Osiris. Now we've been seeing him a lot more in week 2.
And this is one that worked out really well for the Warriors. They ran this. Admittedly, it was with like the Bologna, the Freya, the Xbalanque. So like last time around, this was a huge aspect for them out of the jungle when they were playing up against the Titans. I think it's going to be something that you can expect pretty heavy-handed from Cuvo Fred, especially because, you know, and we like to give Cuvo, or I say like to, we end up, maybe I accidentally end up giving Cuvo a lot of hell because sometimes it is, you know, very much if you get one of these like 3 or 4 gods, then you're going to get a good performance out of Cuvo most of the time. But if it's anything outside of those, things can maybe start to slip up for them. And maybe, you know, you can talk about meta, you can talk about god picks in that meta. I think that's something that was a little rough for the Warriors last phase. Or not last phase, last year. I think that this year it has been a lot more consistent. The Daji obviously has been like a godsend to them. It has been nuts, and I think that's a deserved ban. But I think this Osiris was really good for them on Friday. I think the Nemesis, even though it didn't necessarily get to pop off, is still one of the stronger picks. So I'm excited to see what this Osiris is going to be able to do in his hands.
Freya and Yemoja will go over to the Bolts this time around. I should say. At least the Freya will go over to the Bolts. The Yemoja was already there prior. Meanwhile, for the Oni Warriors, the Baron Samedi gets locked in. And until we know maybe one more selection, not 100% onto where this Baron is going to be going just yet. It did go to Neil last week, and he was able to find, I believe, his first win on that god, at least in the support role. And then Osiris still has some flexibility between that jungle and the solo lane as well. So let's see at least one more pick from the Warriors before we know exactly where to go. Luckily for us, they'll have the whole draft next time that we get to see it before. And then Uller, who has been, for a lot of teams, kind of been that top 3 ban, and then occasionally he'll squeak in as a top pick. This time around makes it to 3rd, and then a Fenrir for the Olympus Bolts to round out their draft.
I like this so far. I think Fenrir is good against the picks that are already on the table. He's good at chasing down people like the Uller and finding ganks against them specifically. And I also think that it's something that Lasber just plays really well. And given the combos they've been going for, I mean, you pick someone up in a Ragnarok, hold him in place, Freya's going to kill him. If you do go back to the Kukul Khan, guess what? He's going to kill him. So there's a lot of combo potential off of that ult. And then at the end of the day, it also just burns beads, makes things easier for someone like a Yemoja, either with a Riptide or maybe with the River's Rebuke if you can lock some people in. And then even potentially more CC depending on what they lock in for Haddix. I think there's a lot of top end for what this jungle can provide.
Well, talking about really good KDAs and really good performances on an individual god, I told Gore this before the death start. I've been looking through all of his spreadsheets and docs that he leaves up, trying to get better at navigating them. And if I'm looking at this one correctly, 14 games played total in his career on this Fenrir, nearly a 79% win rate on this god. So another big pick for Lasbra on the Bolts. But as the bans roll through, Robin and Artio banned away by the Olympus Bolts, Chiron and King Arthur for the side of the Oni Warriors.
You know what? I'm just going to sort Lasbra by win rate because it's so wild. Like, granted, you're always going to have those things that are at 100% when they played it once and won.
It worked.
Likewise, you always get stuff at 0% because they played it once and it didn't work. Things like that. Like, I'm just now learning Lasbra has never won a game on Thor, which seems really wild
I noticed
to
that
me,
earlier when I scrolled.
considering how impressive Thor as a god is. But like, you know, your Fenrirs, the Ratatosker, I know like they were talking about it. Barrow was messaging me about a bunch of their like top win rates yesterday. And after I gave him one, everybody on the team wanted more. And so like running things that they used to, you know, I think it was like Rat, Apollo, stuff like that, has just really climbed them up. But the fact that you've got so many for Lasbra that are like 20 plus games and over 60% is absolutely wild to have in a career.
Absolutely. And now Horus locked in for the Bolts. Going over to Haddix potentially. With this Fenrir and Yemoja locked in, definitely not going to be going to the support role with Yemoja over there. Fenrir most likely into the jungle, unless we see this Horus flex to the jungle and the Fenrir goes solo. So a little bit of flexibility potential, but more than likely based off considering the fact that Haddix has been playing this guy a lot more in the solo lane, probably expecting it to go over there.
Yeah, I'm just expecting I'm expecting a lot of Haddix here. I think it's a pick that they ran a couple times successfully. And then right about the time that we were starting to expect it and talk about it a lot more, he stopped playing it. This is something I think that it's surprising. Again, you know, when Ro was here for Masters, it was something that we had talked about on the desk for the Bolts, that you get the early game scaling of a warrior, right? You've got a good knock-up, decent, well, not like the best clear, but like good enough to be able to keep up. and then you transition into the late game scaling of a Guardian. Now, right now, you know, when you have a conversation, depending on the tanks and who you're asking, you're just, cool, can I pop relics, things like that, but you've got a heal, you've got a really good ultimate, I think, if used properly, and we've seen the bolts use it properly, plus you can itemize into some interesting relics because your ult already gets you around so far. So I really like this pick, and honestly, I like the entirety of what the bolts have to offer. Although I will say, as long as, well, man, I didn't necessarily like the Freya mid that we saw yesterday. And I know I did immediately say I don't think I would mind seeing other people try it, but I don't know that I want that, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I think they could make it work, but I feel like in this instance, maybe the Artemis thrown over into the mid lane would feel a little more comfortable than maybe what the Freya could provide. There's too much foot traffic in mid for a Freya to be happy and get farm.
Well, no matter which one we get between the Artemis or the Freya, at least with the Freya from Venenu, he's had some success in the past, 75% win rate with that god. Only 4 games played at that time. Only 1 game on Artemis mid, that one didn't go so well, so going to be a little interesting, at least for the Olympus Bolts, whether they elect to put that Freya in the mid in Venenu's hands, or are they going to throw the Artemis mid, which we've seen a few times. Darda specifically on the Only Warriors has run that one a couple of times in the past. Benny Q's run that. Benny Q runs everything. Between Benny and Benny Q and like Pagon, it's more of a question of what haven't they run at a competitive level in the mid lane at this point.
You go back far enough, Benny Q was just locking in Blink Artemis in every SCC game and winning. And winning well.
Yeah, that's the caveat. Is not only was he locking in, he was winning those games too. Those guys have been around the scene for a long time. But let's talk about this Cthulhu on the opposite end here. Because when you see the Freya locked in, you know, okay, that's one hunter who's not going to be able to pick up kin sides to deal with the Cthulhu. Then you look at a Fenrir. We've been seeing a little bit of auto attack style build, but we haven't really been seeing kin sides come out of there. So then it did kind of force the Bolt's hands to maybe picking up one of these hunters. So now it does beg that question of, you know, is this Artemis going to be enough to deal with Cthulhu? Once he goes up into that ultimate, there's really no one on the Bolts team that can necessarily stop him outside of what I can only imagine would be Jake with the Rouge Rebuke.
Yeah, this is something that I think the standard way of dealing with the Cthulhu, like you highlighted, is itemization, but also things like the Nemesis usually comes into play. I think that you have 2 really, really high damaging single target gods, and so if you just lock him down with, you know, a Vengeful Assault slow, if you throw, or sorry, not Vengeful Assault, suppress the Insolent with the slow, or if you use the Caledonian Boar to get the stun, if you get a banish and then the follow-up afterward, I think the 2 of them in tandem can just burn through a Cthulhu's health bar pretty quickly. Maybe not easily, but quickly.
Definitely not going to be easily, especially with the changes that came in 9.5. Everybody getting more health, more protections.
Not any early game kills on this guy.
That just means it's even harder, even potentially late game for Cthulhu, because that more base HP means now he gets more to convert over towards his ultimate whenever he does have that transformation. We'll see if the Oni Warriors can bounce back in game number 2, or the Olympus Bolts going to run away with it. We'll throw it over to Dolson and Charlie one more time.
Oni Warriors had their moments in game 1, but unable to fully capitalize, turn that into a lead, and turn that into a win. The Olympus Bolts just more effective down the stretch. And now the Olympus Bolts, Trelly, bringing a composition into game number 2 that we had seen every once in a while, but in bits and pieces, like Ven playing the Artemis mid and Barracuda on the Freya duo. Like that style of comp we've seen a little bit of. And we've seen Horus solo with Awesome Jake on something else in support. We've seen that at times as well, but we've never seen the 2 kind of put together. I'm intrigued as how is this going to work.
Yeah, this one's going to be interesting because if I heard the Oni Warriors are playing and there was a Artemis mid, I would assume it was Dardes, but Ven is going to be piloting this one. Maybe just doesn't want to get out pressured in that mid lane because there is an Uller here. And I got news for you. The Artemis is still going to get out pressured by an Uller, so it doesn't really matter if you are an ADC, but you will be able to bring a certain amount of late game team fight CC that every squad really wants. I just think, you know, the Caledonian board does such a good engage or disengage late game, so I think shouldn't be a problem there. And we get to see a good look at the Cthulhu once again.
Yeah.
A different style of build than when he was last played. That's going to be a conduit gen start for Nika, and a little bit of damage coming here. Only level 1 are the Warriors, so they will have to back up here as Barra just cleans out some autos. The Freya has been getting tremendous early pressure ever since she came back into the meta.
Yeah, what in the world? I'm used to seeing Freya on the opposite side of this lane for the first few minutes of the game at least. That's just a nice little double banish more than anything else. Doesn't happen very often, but Barracuda does make it work here. Am interested potentially a bit worried as to how the Cthulhu's gonna fare this game, only because of the shred that the Bolts have. Later on in the game, Freya plus Ven swinging down damage at Nika. Maybe Ven choose to itemize into the chin size, something like that later on into the build, but should be enough shred in theory to deal with Nika. It's what's happening around all of that shred in the team fights.
Yeah, that's really the question, and I'm worried about, hold that thought, though. That could be a lot of damage. Dart doesn't have the mana to really one combo Lasper here. Good axe, either way. I'm worried about the lane, specifically in solo, because Cthulhu is just going to out-clear Haddix for quite some time. Horus has so much trouble trying to clear the wave successfully. Yes, a back camp invade here. Darda has just stepped up just in case Lasper wanted to try and help out and get those camps. Fenrir not having the best time farm-wise. It looks like Darda is just going to eat some of these auto attacks.
They're mid laners. They're not supposed to be hitting all their auto attacks. Just for a second there, it was very funny. Both missed like 2 autos onto one another. And then Ven got a few easy ones over the next couple of minutes. 2v2 in duo. Neilma body blocked with no mana. The heal could prove to be the difference here. And up and over goes Vote. Awesome Jake now body blocking the last auto attack. And my goodness, both supports and Barracuda all taken relatively low there over in duo. But looks like Neo with his level of health and mana is going to have to slow down on his reinitiation.
Yeah, I think the Baron's going to have to stay a little bit back there. The shell is available for Neil in case, Vote or himself get even lower in that fight. But so much telegraph damage coming from Freya, you can essentially count your HP, see how much he's doing per auto, and then leave that shell until you're in danger of dying. And it looks like not even enough pressure to go for a purple buff invade. So the Oni Warriors are going to be pretty happy about that, and the Bolts are also going to be pretty happy about that because they both just get their own buffs here. We saw some low health bars, and even though the support backed, not feeling confident enough to try and invade there. But again, I just want to highlight this solo lane matchup we see here.
Sure.
Haddix is going to have some trouble for quite some time. Once the Golden Blade comes through, we'll be a little bit safer in lane. We'll be able to clear just with those auto attacks. You can dash to the wave to heal it up, heal yourself, that sort of thing. But I expect Nika to get not active, but just aggressive and try and push this Horus out of lane all the time. Like that's all you really have to do because the clear is just not going to be there for, I'd say two more minutes or so, and even then you're going to be a little bit behind.
Yeah, even then, going to be difficult up against the Cthulhu. Could open up to some blue buff pressure for the Oni Warriors. Want to see what Cubo Fred's going to be able to get done on this Osiris this game. Nemesis had her moments in game 1, but far from the style or performance we've grown a bit more used to from Cubo Fred here in Season 9. Couple of kills here and there, yes, but felt somewhat ineffective as the rest of the game went on. Could be more effective here in the dual lane, though. Awesome Jake doesn't have beads. That's a nice stun on the Barracuda. Riptide gets used. Another one out, but Lord of the Afterlife re-engages, and Cubo Fred has found the first. Stun on the second, and Cubo Fred, right on time, gets the double.
Yeah, that's a massive kill for Cubo. He's off to a great start already. Gets the double kill, gets the beads from Barracuda as well. That Freya has not hit 5, so he's going to have to step up to the wave with no beads if he wants to try and go for a kill. And Vote's got ult, so I mean, if I'm Vote right now, I'm starving that wave. I'm sitting there waiting for this Freya, dropping the sun, stunning a minute, and grabbing a second kill. And it looks like that's exactly what they're doing. That wave, oh no, he's going to push it actually. So doesn't really want to go for the re-kill here unless Neil is going to hide and wait to see if Freya steps up. Maybe that's the idea because, again, no beads, no ultimate. Bear has to clear that full wave.
Yeah. Bear, though, likely knowing that now does get Valkyrie's discretion, so it will be a bit more difficult to kill off Barracuda. Exactly what the Oni Warriors needed because this lane was starting to push up against Vote and Neomod just a bit. Should stabilize now as a couple of assists for both of the dual lane members of the Warriors and now double kill for Cubo Fred. And Cubo Fred's such a passionate Smite player. Guy just loves playing Smite with his team, and you see after a double kill, he's yelling in the player can. Oh, yeah. And he'll play with momentum. He's the style of player that will allow that double kill to fuel him. He's leaned forward in the zone a bit more. And really, I think confidence drives Cubo Fred in the way that he plays the game as well. So whether or not the game slows down or not, I think mentally exactly what Cubo Fred needed after, I'm not going to say bad, but a kind of average performance in game 1. And the Osiris right at level 5 makes the trip to dual lane.
Yeah, Barra
exactly
moved
what you
right
want.
there, a little bit too early too.
It's exactly what you want from Cubo Fred, right on time. A couple auto attacks. We'll get it done, tanks up the tower, heads on out. And top left of your screen there you go. A Cannot tell you what he said. I can, but I'm not allowed to. But he's feeling good about himself is the point.
Yeah, let's just assume he said let's go. He's hyping up the team, and now
that's it, right.
all of the Oni Warriors are hyped in that regard. I'm waiting to see some aggression in solo because Cthulhu went teleport, right? And this Horus has so much CC and lockdown. A knock-up from Haddix into a jump stun from Lasbra into a Ragnarok could easily net a kill onto a Warlock Staff Conduit Gem Cthulhu here. So we haven't seen Lasbra try and force anything in this solo lane. Your duo lane's probably not the option, right? Because Bera and Jake have both found a death already. There's not too much pressure you want to go over there. This is definitely the option. Try and CC this Cthulhu, but I guess Nika has been on point with the vision, and anytime you think you're about to get locked down, you can just go into that Descent into Madness, say, I'm going to retreat all the way to my tower in the meantime, and there's no way you have the DPS to blow me up after the fact. So Lasbra, more so sitting in the mid right now, trying to see what he can find. Just going to sap some farm. These ults aren't flying just yet.
Right, you'd think it would be a good opportunity for Laz with the Ragnarok because beads only for the carries, though CC immunity in some of the other kits. Descent into Madness, you look at Neoma with the Life of the Party, things like that. Those can sort of counter out the Ragnarok, the pull-in. Cuvo Fred with Lord of the Afterlife can jump away. So maybe not the easiest time for Lasbra, but still opportunities to jump in, try to find some beads. Does get a jump in and a pull onto Neoma. And Neoma's going underneath the tier 2 tower over here, ends up using Life of the Party on the other end. Rivers of Butte goes up from Awesome Jake. Down goes Neoma from the coffin, but he's dodging the autos. Awesome Jake will hit the necessary damage, but Jake gets left alone, and the Oni Warriors are able to make it an even trade.
But Haddix ults in here and is looking for Vote. That jump is down. Cubo's also getting shredded. They got to pick a target, though. The Bolts are just split aggression. They don't know who they want. Dardes now the target, and all of them will be able to get out. The Oni Warriors probably should have been able to find a few more deaths. I mean, I guess the Olympus Bolt should have found a few more kills, but a little bit split on their aggression. Vote, though, finds a good set on the Bera.
Vote does not have ultimate. Might in just a second, but realizing that Lasbra is close by, nothing else to be done here for Vote. Though Ragnarok wasn't there, Vote had beads. Actually, it was going to take a little bit of time for that ultimate to come back. Smart from Barracuda. You can't take another stun. Your life is in danger. So 3 assists now for Vote and Neoma. The duo lane has at least met its mark just a bit, and Cubo Fred staying active. But I do want to go back. I wonder how difficult it's going to be for Lasbra to find good value from the Ragnaroks this game.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's really only, are you going to look for this Cthulhu? It was a good opportunity to just get the jump stun, grab Neil, pull him under tier 2 tower. Didn't net a kill. He was able to shell and heal up and stall for a little bit, but you know, that's the one opportunity he's had thus far.
Right.
You really want to try and chain your CC as best as possible, which Horus just brings so much of, so I really thought we'd see a lot of solo lane assists, if you will, with Haddix and Lasbra just combining to try and find the kill. I'm a little bit worried about the dual lane presence right now because Vote starved out a full wave of Bera there. Bera was forced to back because he couldn't really step in, and now Jake has to come and sap some farm just so Bera can step up to this wave. Vote has all the aggression in the world. He's got Bera's beads down and wants to try and fight. Cubo's going to come over as well and say, this purple buff is once again going to be ours.
Oni Warriors are going to funnel their pressure through the left side of the map. There were fireworks last time we saw Cubo Fred on left. This time, though, I think Olympus Bolts realizing that it's not their fight. So all of this has culminated in just about a 1,000 gold lead for the Oni Warriors. Hasn't gotten out of control if you're the Bolts just yet, but nearly 2,000 experience as well isn't necessarily a fantastic stat line. And finally, we do see Nika start to pull ahead just a bit. Figured that the wave pressure, the zone control of the Cthulhu on the right side of the map was going to be effective, but Lasbra does again find an initiation onto a beadsless target. That's Neoma, who yet again goes up onto the coffin, and he'll get sent home in one this time. Awesome Jake with his second kill of the game, so at least the Bolts are finding these kills, but they're all landing on Awesome Jake.
Yeah, that was 3 ults just to get Yamoja another kill there. And Neil has to watch out because without unless you're pre-ulting the coffin, and even if you're pre-ulting the jump stun rather, hold on, there could be a steal opportunity if Dardes knows how low this is, doesn't have vision, and the Pyromancer will go the way of the Bolt says. Just trying to zone out is Haddix right now. Needs a teammate to dash to, but should be just fine.
Yeah, he'll be all right. Not enough damage between Nika and Dardes just yet, but might be now that Cubo Fred is here. Ven has used the beads and a Riptide out. Cubo Fred probably okay with that trade. I'll take a Lord of the Afterlife in if it means the immobile Artemis has to have the beads burnt away. And now potentially opens up a gank opportunity here, Trelly. Venenu a bit more susceptible in mid.
Yeah, he does have to hold on to that Caledonian board now. It's not up at the moment. You have a little bit of time because he did use it to confirm that second kill on the Neil Ma. And Neil is getting that low-nose mask. He's tired of being the only one being focused down. He's tired of saying, like, just because I started Shell, I'm being punished. And I think he was right to start Shell because the Phantom Shell is going to save his team late game. But he could have went beads into Shell, I suppose. So maybe wrong because already 2 deaths because he's just being pulled in by the Ragnarok. Either way, Cubo has just been W-keying. He is not afraid of anything at the moment. 2-0, ulting in, has the blink available, and is just going to run at Jake as the Riptide goes away. And once again, Purple Buff being looked at.
That's what I mean when I say Cubo is just such a momentum-based player. Like you can just tell. Double kill rolls. He's feeling good in the player cam. And now he's just been running all over the map on cooldown. Purple Buff's getting taken away. It's a great way of keeping this Freya behind as the game goes on and giving Vote a 1-level lead. Though Awesome Jake also has a 1-level lead, some of that farm being sapped away from Bera could also result in XP discrepancy. It's kind of been a jockeying of position over in the solo lane as well. This would be a good boon to whichever team is able to grab it. Awesome Jake walks forward. Double stun around the Fury, but a life of the party will stun out onto Venenu, who's in the middle of all of the action here. River's Rebuke will crash down, and Ven has lived far too long. But Lasper with a double. Barracuda finds one as well, and suddenly the Bolts rally around the Gold Fury, and they knock down 4 members of the Oni Warriors in one fell swoop.
That's a triple kill for Lasbra. That Gold Fury should definitely be getting pulled, and it will. Nika's doing back cam, stepped over to see if he could help out, rotate a little bit late to his squad, and then saw triple kill and was like, well, back camps look like a good idea, so not going to step up to this one. You don't want to fight that Fenrir. You don't want to fight anyone on the Bolts by yourself, and it looks like Haddock is actually just being a menace and zoning him away and trying to steal away a blue buff in the process. So massive swing in favor of the Bolts. I mean, that was the first time that Lasber's actually gotten a kill because he set up 2 with the Ragnarok, but Jake got the credit for both of them. Now, he's got 3 kills, 3 assists. It's been a part of everything. This Fenrir has just been so impactful. I mean, just a beautiful fight by the Bolts.
Yeah, Lasbra, you know, just the same as Cubo Fred, able to kind of ride the momentum of a set. That's a real great game in game 1. Not the highest damaging Daji performance, but super high in kill participation with the Palau, and really the last bit of burst damage on some of the squishy targets. Carry some of that momentum now into that fight. And the Oni Warriors, I mean, for good reason, maybe feeling like they could get away with one there. Ven gets taken pretty low. Ven ends up dying early on in that fight. But Laz just too strong. Now finishes up Stone Cutting Sword. Should be able to have an impact. I wonder, you start feeling more comfortable defending some of these purple buffs.
Nope, still going down.
Suppose not. Voda's just going to keep getting them 2 levels ahead of Barracuda. So great you get 4 kills, but you got to look out for Vote and the impact this Hou Yi is going to be able to have over the Freya at the moment.
Yeah, even after that massive swing, almost a deicide, everyone but the Cthulhu falls. Vera still cannot get a purple buff. He gets the Gold Fury, and he's holding on to his beads. Probably he takes over level 12, will get a second relic, but that purple buff still does not belong to him. Just outrageous pressure from Vote. Still a 1-level lead, pretty close to 2. So I think this Freya's got a long way to go before Vera feels safe and can rotate freely. But the Bolts are pretty happy that they can use that gold elsewhere. I want to see some action now from Lasbra. I can see him now hiding in the mid lane, waiting for someone to step up. Just a jump stun into a Ragnarok. They have tons of DPS. Neil might have sniffed that one out, and or just got lucky that he wasn't ready to pull the trigger just yet.
So the Olympus Bolts will hover themselves over towards mid. Pyromancer will be respawning here in about a minute or so. So both the neutral objectives relatively staggered out here. Whatever team is in control come the next couple of minutes should be in a great position to get both of the objectives. Jake walks forward. How much danger is he in really, though? Goes Sovereignty first, and then Don't You Worry. Goes back into the Chronos Pendant. He's getting whittled away here, but it is taking a minute. Neoma and Cubo Fred just simply do not have the damage, but the Olympus Bolts, how about the rotation pressure? And Cubo Fred eats a brutalize, and the Olympus Bolts find another. Now Neoma Ragnaroked into the back. Caledonian Boar just to confirm the kills, and Awesome Jake is on a roll. And so are the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah, how many times have we seen a decent engage from the Warriors turn bad because Haddox ults in? This is the second time now. Nika does make the rotation, but a little bit late once again, and now the Pyromancer should be relatively free for the Bolts, and losing 2 is going to hurt. Cubo already got shut down, so that kill streak's not continuing, but 2-2 on the Osiris has been trying to get active and trying to force as much as he can, but there's just not much you can do when you're always at a disadvantage. And this is why Haddix's Horus was being banned away. It's not going to get you overwhelming lane pressure. It's not going to bring you overwhelming damage, but with a teleport and an ult, you can just zoom across the map and you'll always make your presence known.
Yeah, I mean, total, and maybe not for lack of trying for Nika. I mean, only has teleport compared to the rotation power that Haddix has. Lasbra gets jumped on and stunned. Should have enough damage even through the ultimate. No, he doesn't. Vote turns it around. It's exactly what the Oni Warriors needed in a 1v1. Vote will stun up Lasbra, drop the Suns, and drop the hammer, and that's a shutdown onto the Olympus Bolts jungle.
Yeah, that's a massive rotation by Dardes, because it seemed like Vote was very confident, and then once he realized how much the auto attacks were doing from Lasbra, was like, maybe I don't have the DPS to outbox him, and then Dardes said, you don't need it. I'm going to jump in and hit a nice axe stun as well, double stun, and the shutdown onto the 4-0 Fenrir. Now Lasbra's got some time to think about what he wants to do with this build, but that's a lot of gold going back in the hands of the Warriors. Jake is going to be in a little bit of trouble here, but has the beads.
Awesome Jake, remember, has been caught out a couple of times at the start of these fights, but that ends up turning around and being a great fight for the Olympus Bolts over the next couple of seconds. And this time, though, the Emoja should and is able to get out just fine. The Emperor's Armor meta continues here, Trelly, and it's pretty early on in the build for Awesome Jake. Sovereignty, Chronos Pendant, Emperor's Armor. What a meta we're living in. But Jake getting just so much value in each of those three items kind of on an individual basis.
Yeah, we saw the Lasbra build last item, Emperor's Armor on the Dodgy last game.
Yep.
This time, just going to force it very early on. Cuvo sees Jake and immediately starts W-keying. And how many times have we seen this happen? Jake is little, but we'll be able to just zoom on out of there. Primal Fury spawning in shortly, though. I want to see both solo laners here, and it looks like Nika's already made the rotation. Haddix is going to clear up some buffs on the right side and then maybe make it a little late, but has to teleport up and the ultimate to the skies can get him there as quickly as possible. Still, though, 2-level lead for Vote. This is definitely the biggest lead that you want to see and exploit as much as you can, because the Freya cannot match this damage.
A lot of it's got to be on Vote and hitting the damage. How about this from the Oni Warriors? You're in a pretty decent deficit. You're going to pull the Primal Fury, but you're not going to get it. It's a jump in and a steal from the Olympus Bolts. Bad to worse, and Lasbra notches another. The fight after the fact doesn't look much better for the Oni Warriors. A decent ultimate out of Vote. Slows down Haddix on his reinitiation, but Barracuda fixes the problem. It's a Fury steal plus 3 kills for the Olympus Bolts, and the Oni Warriors, they cannot buy a win here in game 2.
And it looks like Nika's going to have to run away as well. That was such a beautiful steal by Lasbra. He had the opportunity to jump out there, but he jumped in place to stun for his team so they could get even more kills. So maybe his KD is going to hurt a little bit, but the fight after the fact is all the team wanted. Now the Bolts are feeling confident enough, so confident that they're going to pull this. It's a 4v2, but that's a Cthulhu with a lot of HP. It's going to be a 50-50, and I don't think Nika even wants to try and steal that one. Neil is still here. And it's going to get CC'd, and it looks like Haddix is just going to play zone duty. The Fire
Haddix
Giant
actually has enough damage to maybe take this fight. Doesn't want to go underneath the tier 2 tower. Fire Giant, a chance to delay it for Lasbra on the respawn, but too risky with a couple members of the Oni Warriors hovering close by. Lasbra steals away the objective, starts off the fight for his team, and now the Olympus Bolts, with one of the earliest Fire Giants you'll see in this current meta, shy of 20 minutes, 7,500 gold ahead. And a real great opportunity to inflate that number.
This is why Jake got Emperor's Armor. That was an overwhelming amount of confidence. He knew this Fire Giant was coming shortly, and they would need it to try and siege these tier 2 towers so early. And it looks like with the grouping of the squad, they should be able to get at least one and then back up. The Oni Warriors are split, going to grab a mid tower, and Vote is going to push up as much as he can in that left lane. Barracuda is probably going to back and be able to finish some of these rings, and that's what I've been looking for this Freya to finally come online. We saw in game number 1, obviously, Vote was off to a great start, was able to get those items on a little bit faster, but Bear was getting camped a little bit, also just didn't have pressure in lane. Finally, we're going to see some action out of this Freya and some just real shred. He's been getting active as much as he really can, but he should be able to frontline pretty easily now with the squad.
My goodness, look at this jungle level difference right now. 4 levels ahead is Lasbra, 19 to 15 of Cuvo Fred. And Awesome Jake happens to also be level 15. Gives you a good idea of the location, the presence of the initiation for the Olympus Bolts. A lot of it's been with Lasbra, who's had a great game, but Haddix has absolutely made a difference. Ven with some big Tuskies have made differences in these fights as well. Now with 2 Trebuchets available on the map, the Olympus Bolts will only send the 1, holding onto the Trebuchet over on right. Plenty of time left on this Fire Giant buff. Should be able to easily knock down a couple of these towers. Advantage still lies with Vote to an extent. Bear goes back and spends up about 2.3k gold. Vote's still working into that crit tree. But that level gap, remember, was what? 2 levels for Vote a little while ago? Now that's closed back up. Oni Warriors are now hoping for a miracle play, miracle initiation to keep the Olympus bolts out.
Yeah, Bear would love about 400 more gold, would love that Rod of Tootie or a Nimble Rod of Tootie. Either one would help him out a ton in the DPS department, but still, Vote would love a Deathbringer as well, so it's not like these builds are finalized. If you really want a gauge of how this match is going and how different the gold is looking, look no further than Awesome Jake's build compared to Neilmaw's build. Just so much tankier, is able to dish out so much more cooldowns and that sort of thing, while Neil is forced into Lono's Masked Spirit Robe. He doesn't even have the bead, so he had to go for the sprint for his team in that Phantom Shell. It's so hard to be a frontliner as a level 12 Baron with not enough tank stats. This Trebuchet is going to start hitting, and I don't even think that the Oni Warriors can reach it to try and DPS it. It's just going to be Dardes dropping 3s on it consistently as this tier 2 tower is getting looked at, and Haddix is on the wraparound.
Haddix could get something going. Banish. Certainly would have been an initiation for the Bolts had it hit a priority target. Decent stun out of Vote, but where does Haddix go? Maybe a follow-up on the River's Rebuke. Phantom Shell gets used, so Neil lost some value out of the gold that he spent. But now Haddix dashes in onto Neilma, who goes up onto the coffin. CC immunity helps out Neil, but Haddix has some of his own as well, taking a heap of damage by the time that ultimate channels. But it looks like tier 1 and tier 2 tower on left is what the Olympus Bolts were looking for. I don't know, with Haddix with his ultimate down, maybe just try to push this Trebuchet forward a bit. 30 seconds left on your Fire Giant buff, maybe considering a Phoenix Siege.
Yeah, Haddix did teleport back in. That mid-tier 2 is still standing tall, and I guess the Bolts don't care about that. They want the bird, and Haddix will step in here. It takes a little bit of damage. They don't really have a telegraph engage.
Oh, that's big from Lasbra. Jumps up, down onto Neilma, but Neilma survives. And Nika now frontlining for his squad, but Barracuda swinging away. Look at the fray, a full HP up into the sky. And down he crashes into some more damage. The Oni Warriors simply do not have the damage, do not have the health to fight back into this deficit. The Olympus Bolts, they'll knock down a left side Phoenix right on time, 45 seconds to the next FG.
Yeah, definitely a smart play by the Warriors to back off there. If they try to defend that any longer, that turns into the end of the game and not the end of one of your birds. So smart to realize that even though they had the Descent into Madness, even though they had some good CC and knockups, they didn't want to stick around any longer and watch that fight. But because of how much gold the Bolts just got, there's going to be even more massive power spikes coming through. Venenu can finish that Fail Knot. And Barracuda definitely going to get a Nimble Rod of Tahuti here. They just have so much that they are able to do. Fire Giant's up very shortly, and with that left side bird down, Nika's going to have to clear it up himself and teleport back in. We'll even have the time. With how much DPS the Bolts have, I don't think it's going to be an option.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Oni Warriors, 11k down. Not many options on the map right now, Trelly. Much less any that the Oni Warriors can really choose for themselves. You're just hoping someone from the Bolts makes a mistake, an overextension, a missed set of beads. You only have 3 shells, no Aegises for the Bolts. All 3 of those shells are down. So as far as big burst damage goes, could be a difference maker for the Oni Warriors. Dardes hits an important axe, has Titan's Bane. I mean, there are options, but it's really all got to align for the Oni Warriors to have some type of shot here at the end of this game. And how about a convincing performance up to this point for the Bolts? Oni Warriors looked great at moments in game 1. The Olympus Bolts just a bit more resilient and now have run over the Oni Warriors after that 4-for-1 trade and haven't really looked back. Fire Giant, this one will be quiet. Nobody from the Oni Warrior steps up. You got Fire Minions pushing down left, Oni Minions plus Trebuchet on right, and an exposed Phoenix, and the Bolts will head there.
And it looks like Huvo Fred did get picked up here. Lasper has the Bumbus Hammer.
Haddix, he's ulting. How far can he reach, though? Just out of range of Huvo Fred, who's got to use the Lord of the Afterlife, but this may have caught the Oni Warriors a bit off guard. You're not defending this tier 2 tower anyway. Luckily, Huvo Fred able to leap out, or else this game almost certainly over.
Yeah, now the right side Phoenix with the Trebuchet is going to be looked at by the Bolts. I imagine Lasbra just runs it down mid and tries to split off someone from the Oni Warriors. They don't want a true 5v5 here. There's Fire Minions in left as well, so someone is going to have to retreat. Patience is the name of the game here for the Bolts. They really don't have to force anything. They can just sit by the wayside and say, hey, someone's going to have to leave eventually or Fire Minions just end this game. And they're going to hold the Trebuchet back for a little bit longer and wait until they're really able to siege this Phoenix.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's taking a 1v1 against Lasper right now. Cuba Fred's going to have to, but at what feels like a serious item disadvantage.
And his ult's back up.
And his ult's back up. Doesn't have Blink, but of course the leap has been enough for Lasper this game. Only to say that Cubo Fred should be able to play a bit more forward without worrying about a blink in from Lasbra. But blink in from Haddix, that's a threat. Neoma stunned, melted through, up onto the coffin. How many times have we seen this? As the boar flies through from Venenu, Jake throws up the walls, Nika backpedaling away as he descends into madness. And the rest of the Bolts connecting their damage onto the Phoenix. Neoma, the first to go down in this fight. Lasbra looking for a second, and it's Cubo Fred on the menu. And the Bolts can now rally around the mid lane Phoenix.
Yeah, this should be the last bird to fall as that left one is pretty close to spawning back in, but just too much damage coming the way of the Bolts. The Oni Warriors have some auto attackers here. They're ready to try and throw out some DPS, but everyone just goes in off of Lasbra's jumps.
Up, down from Lasbra. Riptide back through from Awesome Jake, and the Bolts will find their way into the Titan room. The Oni Warriors are going to have to deal some cleave damage here because the Bolt's just so healthy. Lasbra goes up, down onto the back line. A banish mitigated out, and Lasbra finds the first onto Cubo Fred. Up, down onto Dardes. Ven has another in this game as well. That Trebuchet may just finish this game, but the Olympus Bolts sure will. 2-0 to the Bolts over the Warriors.
What an explosive set from Lasbra. I mean, the Bolts looked so good the whole time, but Lasbra himself, man, was just popping off on that dodge G. We already gave him so much credit. And then this Fenrir as well. All of these picks started from an Unchained in, a beautiful stun, and then forcing something. Great rotations from Haddix as well. Whenever you think it's a 3v3, a 4v4, there was always that Horus flying in to make sure the team was there. Just phenomenal performance out of both of them.
And this was like a headlining game for the Bolts at the start of this phase, because we've seen matches where Barracuda hasn't been able to be in studio. The team hasn't gotten the practice, I think, that they've really wanted to have. So you give them some credit where some of the stumbles may have come from. Their normal practice and all that process isn't quite the same as it always is. Being able to find wins in very contested matchups like this, despite situations like that, speaks volumes about this Bolts team. Excited to see what they can get done the rest of the year, and excited to see what the desk has to say after a 2-0 Bolts win.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave and Trellian. What a great game for the Olympus Bolts. What a good set for them in general. Yeah. Again, though, Oni Warriors starting off strong to get the game going. Cubo Fred finds a double kill over in the dual lane off an early rotation. But then team fight in mid goes south for the Oni Warriors. The Olympus Bolts, specifically Lasbra, picks up a triple kill during that. And from that point onward, the Olympus Bolts, again, take control of the game much earlier than they did in game number 1, but just as convincingly as that same game.
When you get a 4-man swing and your jungler gets a triple kill and then afterwards you're able to get the Gold Fury off it, yeah, that's usually going to help set things up for you pretty cleanly at that point. I think Lasbra has a really good game. Again, a lot of the Bolts are playing impeccably here, and he gets a lot of the kills, so maybe a little bit more of the credit for the flashiness of where it is. But I think that this is just a draft as a whole. The Bolts were doing their homework. You look at what the Warriors were trying to do and able to do on Friday, and what they wanted to do coming into today. And I think the Bolts in their picks and bans, they handled it really well by taking some of those things away, stripping them down to make sure that it wasn't going to be as easy for the Warriors in terms of getting a lot of that power, and then picking things that they themselves have showcased that they are very proficient on, right? I think that we got really good play out of Barra here on the Freya. We obviously got 2 great games out of Lasbra, but I think being able to throw Vin onto the Artemis, I think being able to have that Kukulkan in game number 1 as well was like a huge portion of the damage they were able to then do during the duration of this set.
Lasbra ends with a 7-2-8 slash line. Haddix a 1-0-11 on the Horus, going for a bit of a different start. We haven't seen the Warriors axe in some time, and then bringing out the Heroes axe at the very end. The double Golden Blade obviously going to give them a lot of clear, both in lane and in jungle for the 2 of them respectively. And then Lasbra just able to set up so much of the early game. Even Awesome Jake, again on this Umoja, able to put up some decent numbers, 3, 2, and 12 for his slash line. And this Chronos Pendant start, man, I don't know what it is with Jake and wanting to go with Chronos Pendant. Maybe we'll get to talk to him a little bit about that with our post-game interview, but he has been loving to go with this item on these Guardians, and it's been working. And you know what? Like the other day when I saw it on the Xing Chen, I really enjoyed it then because I was just like, cool, Furious shouts, like give them to me as much as you can. Furious roars as often.
often as possible, then you get your dashes are up a little bit more often. And I think it's a very similar concept that even though you're not working with cooldowns here, you're still going to have a lot of power behind your punch, and that's something that Yemoja can work with really well when you get the bubble bounce and the moon strike, things like that. So it is very fun to watch. And again, maybe having it transcend the build or transcend the god, not just be like a Xing Chen or an aggressive support thing, but being able to kind of pull it out on others.
It kind of becomes the player thing more than anything else. Like, I'm the guy who's going to be building this no matter what god I'm playing. We've been seeing.
If it's the option of pulling out the Chronos Pendant or having to stack Thebes for like another 20 minutes, I like the Chronos Pendant.
Well, the Chronos Pendant worked out for Awesome Jake. The Yemoja worked out for Awesome Jake in this game, and we're going to talk to Awesome Jake a little bit for our post-game interview standing by. First off, congrats on your 2-0 win over the Warriors. Tell us a little bit about this Chronos Pendant. Is it just a little bit of spice into the build, having a little bit of fun?
You just whip the pendant, have really low cooldowns, do a bunch of damage, have a lot of fun. Just to win on all sides. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Now, outside of Smite, I want to drop a bit of a fun question to you. You're staring at, up against, let's just throw any of the supports out there. Well, let's throw Neil Ma since he's the one you just played against. You got to play against Neil Ma in one sport, one thing outside of Smite that you think you're guaranteed to get a win on him over. What sport are you taking Neil in?
I'm kind of like an esports player, so I don't really do the sport thing. Okay. But I do play ping pong. So
do you think you can take Neil in ping pong?
I've been practicing.
Okay.
I think I could take him. I've been practicing at the studio. At home, we have a ping pong table.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, boom.
I've been seeing the Warriors getting a lot of practice out there, so it's gonna be a tall task for you. Maybe we'll have to get you two to square off over at that point. But how does it feel for your team? You find a win over the Dragons early on in the week. Now you find a 2 over the Warriors. Man, how's the team been feeling?
Really good start to the season. Just trying to keep this momentum. Trying to get the 14-0 this time. Last year we were pretty close to the longest win streak, and we're trying to keep that going. All right. Yeah.
Well, let's see if you guys can get there. Congrats on your win. I'll let you back and continue to celebrate. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, bye.
That's a lot to try and go for those win streaks. This happened twice last year, where two teams had gone to 8-0. They were one away from tying it and then potentially beating it. And wasn't it the Kings both times that ended up stopping that win streak?
Yes, the Kings were the ones that
maybe
pulled the full stop.
Yeah, so maybe for the Bolts' sake, they hope they don't play the Kings if they do get to 8-0 at that point. So maybe a little bit of hope there. Let's take a look, though, at the schedule for today. Our first set is over now with the Bolts finding a 2-0 over the Warriors. Our next one up will be the Valhalla Valkyries and the Tartarus Titans, and then the Solar Scarabs and the Camelot Kings to round out our day. The Valkyries able to take the Scarabs to a 2-1 set just yesterday. The Tartarus Titans falling to the Oni Warriors early on, so maybe a little bit of intrigue in this set, because you never know which of these two versions of the team that we're going to be getting out.
I've got my eyes on the Valks. I think this is going to be a difficult one for them no matter what, because the Titans are the Titans, but I do think that they are within shooting range, right? And I think that's true of every single team in the league right now. The Valkyries are just looking for that win. Because, you look back on it, right, things aren't necessarily going too hot for them here in Season 9 so far, but the last one they had was over the Leviathans, right, the reigning world champs. So I don't want to count anything out for them. I honestly think they've got a lot going for them. It's just getting that grip on the meta, and this one's going to be just as hard, right? Benny versus Paul, I think, is going to be a really awesome mid lane matchup, but the duo lanes are very important. I think the solo lane is very important here, and so I'm just excited to see how this one shakes out.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a very fun match to watch, a very fun set of games still to come as well between the Valkyries and the Titans, and as I said earlier, the Scarabs and the Camelot Kings will be to round out the day. But before we get to set 3, we got to get to set 2, and that's coming up right after this break.